Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that many believed would remain unthinkable for years to come. Putin's red line has been shattered as Ukraine hits Moscow in a stunning attack, sending shockwaves through Russia's political system, its military leadership, and its population. This is not just another escalation in the war. It is a defining moment that challenges long-held assumptions about power, security, and the limits of modern warfare. For a long time, Moscow was treated as sacred ground. The Kremlin worked tirelessly to convince Russians that no matter what happened on the battlefield, the capital would remain untouched. Ukrainian cities were bombed, infrastructure was destroyed, and civilians lived under constant threat, while Moscow carried on with an air of normalcy. Cafes stayed open, luxury cars filled the streets, and state television reassured viewers that Russia was firmly in control. That carefully maintained illusion has now been shattered. When reports began to surface of Ukraine striking targets in or around Moscow, the psychological impact was immediate. Air defenses were activated, emergency services rushed into action, flights were disrupted, and security measures tightened around key government buildings. Videos and eyewitness accounts spread rapidly, showing smoke, flashes in the sky, and a city suddenly confronted with the reality of war. Even as officials attempted to downplay the situation, the message was clear. The war had reached Russia's heart. To understand why this moment is so significant, we need to understand what Moscow represents. Moscow is not just a capital city. It is the nerve center of Russian power, the seat of the Kremlin, the headquarters of military command, and the symbol of Vladimir Putin's authority. Any successful strike near Moscow carries enormous symbolic weight. It challenges the idea that Russia is invulnerable and that Putin can guarantee security at home while waging war abroad. For Vladimir Putin, this moment strikes at the core of his leadership image. For decades, he has positioned himself as the man who restored Russia's strength and stability after years of turmoil. His legitimacy rests not on elections, but on the promise of control. The promise that under his rule, Russia would be strong, respected, and secure. A Ukrainian strike on Moscow directly undermines that promise, even if the physical damage is limited. Ukraine's ability to hit Moscow also exposes the changing nature of modern warfare. This conflict is no longer defined solely by tanks and artillery. Drones, intelligence, cyber capabilities, and precision strikes have reshaped the battlefield. Ukraine, despite facing a much larger adversary, has adapted rapidly. Through innovation and determination, it has found ways to reach targets once thought unreachable. This is not just a military achievement, it is a strategic statement. From Ukraine's perspective, the strike on Moscow is about consequences. Since the beginning of the war, Ukrainian leaders have argued that Russia would not stop unless it felt the cost of its aggression. Ukrainian cities have endured relentless attacks. Homes, hospitals, and schools have been destroyed. Millions have been displaced. Restraint did not protect Ukraine from suffering. Bringing the war to Moscow is meant to force Russia's leadership and population to confront the reality of the conflict. The concept of a red line has been central to Russia's messaging throughout the war. The Kremlin repeatedly warned that certain actions would provoke severe responses. Strikes deep inside Russia, especially near Moscow, were often implied to be unacceptable. Yet Ukraine's attack shows that these red lines may be more flexible than advertised. When red lines are crossed without catastrophic consequences, their power diminishes. Inside Russia, reactions to the attack reveal deep tensions. Official narratives emphasize resilience and control. State media insists that air defenses are effective and that the situation is under control. But beneath the surface, fear is spreading. For many Russians, this is the first time the war feels personal. It is no longer something happening far away. It is something that can affect their daily lives, their safety, and their families. Fear changes how societies think. When people feel secure, they tolerate propaganda and sacrifice. When fear enters their lives, questions emerge. Why is this war happening? Why has it reached Moscow? Why are ordinary people now at risk? These questions may not lead to immediate unrest, but they erode the foundations of unquestioned loyalty that authoritarian systems rely on. The Russian military now faces uncomfortable scrutiny. Moscow is one of the most heavily defended cities in the world. Russia has long promoted its air defense systems as among the best globally. A successful Ukrainian strike raises serious questions. Were defenses overwhelmed? Were resources stretched too thin? Were systems mismanaged or outdated? Or does corruption play a role? Whatever the explanation, confidence has been shaken. Within the Kremlin, the pressure is intense. Hardliners are likely calling for retaliation and escalation. They argue that failing to respond forcefully will embolden Ukraine and its allies. Others may privately worry that each escalation increases the risk of a wider conflict or domestic instability. Striking back harder may satisfy short-term demands for strength, but it does not erase the fact that Moscow was reached. Ukraine, meanwhile, understands the risks it is taking. A strike on Moscow could provoke harsher Russian responses, including intensified attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. But from Kiev's perspective, those attacks have already been happening. Ukrainian cities have been bombed regardless of Ukraine's restraint. The calculation is clear. If suffering is unavoidable, then pressure must be applied where it matters most. This moment also has major implications for international politics. Governments around the world are watching closely. Western leaders are weighing their support for Ukraine against fears of escalation. Some analysts warn that strikes on Moscow could spiral into a broader conflict. Others argue that allowing Russia to wage war without consequences at home only prolongs the violence. The debate highlights how fragile global stability has become. The symbolism of Moscow being hit cannot be overstated. Capitals are more than administrative centers. They are symbols of national identity and power. When a capital is threatened, it resonates far beyond military calculations. It affects public morale, elite confidence, and international perception. Ukraine's strike sends a message that no city is untouchable in modern warfare. The digital age amplifies this effect. In the past, governments could control information more effectively. Today, every smartphone is a potential witness. Videos and photos spread instantly, often faster than official statements. Images of smoke over Moscow and air defenses lighting up the sky travel across the world, shaping perceptions in real time. Narrative control becomes nearly impossible. For ordinary Ukrainians, this moment carries mixed emotions. There is a sense of grim satisfaction that the war is no longer one-sided, but there is also fear. Ukrainians know too well how devastating retaliation can be. They understand that every escalation brings new risks. Yet many also believe that forcing Russia to feel the war is the only way to move toward an eventual end. The humanitarian cost of this conflict remains immense. Civilians on both sides suffer the consequences of decisions made by leaders. Ukrainian families continue to endure displacement, loss, and trauma. Russian civilians now experience a glimpse of that insecurity. While responsibility for the war lies with political leadership, ordinary people pay the highest price. Putin's red line being shattered also affects Russia's relationships with its allies and partners. Countries that rely on Russian security guarantees may begin to question their reliability. If Moscow cannot fully protect itself, how credible are its promises to others? This moment may quietly reshape alliances and calculations far beyond Eastern Europe. There is also the issue of deterrence. For years, Russia relied on the threat of escalation to discourage certain actions. Ukraine's strike suggests that deterrence is not absolute. When a country believes its survival is at stake, it may be willing to take risks that others consider unthinkable. This challenges traditional models of power and restraint. As the war enters this new phase, the future is uncertain. Will Russia escalate further, intensifying its campaign in Ukraine and tightening control at home? Will Ukraine continue to target symbolic locations to maintain pressure? Or could this shock create space, however small, for renewed diplomatic efforts? History shows that wars often change direction after moments that shatter assumptions. For Vladimir Putin, the challenge now is not only military but political. Maintaining control when fear spreads at home is far more difficult than projecting strength abroad. Increased censorship, repression, and propaganda may follow, but fear has a way of seeping through cracks. Once people realize they are not safe, trust erodes. Globally, this moment forces a reevaluation of how wars are fought and contained. The idea that major powers can keep conflicts far from their own populations is increasingly outdated. Technology, innovation, and determination can bring war to places once thought secure. Moscow's experience is a stark reminder of that reality. Putin's red line being shattered does not mean the war is over, but it does mean the terms have changed. The psychological balance has shifted. Ukraine has shown that it can influence not just the battlefield, but the heart of Russian power. That realization will shape decisions on both sides moving forward. As the world watches, one thing is clear. Ukraine hitting Moscow in a stunning attack is a turning point that will be studied for years to come. It challenges narratives, exposes vulnerabilities, and raises urgent questions about escalation, deterrence, and the future of the conflict. Whether this moment leads to deeper chaos or a path toward resolution remains uncertain. Thank you for staying with us through this in-depth analysis. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more updates and insights as this critical story continues to unfold. Stay informed, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.